When he stepped into the cafe minutes later, she stood instantly. Before she could speak, he crossed the room, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her, right there, in front of half the company. Gasps, whispers, but neither of them cared. When they finally parted, Xander said, "Come upstairs with me. I want them to see who saved me." They took the lift to the top floor together. When Aurora entered the boardroom, heads turned. Some with curiosity, others with disapproval. Xander led her to the front. "This," he said, gesturing toward her, "is Aurora Ihoza, the woman you've all speculated about. Now you can stop guessing." Aurora Ihoza woke to sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains, the air scented faintly with bergamot from the diffuser Xander's housekeeper had left in the room. Despite the penthouse's usual sterile polish, her room felt warmer now, lived in. A soft cream robe hung over the wardrobe door. The silk sheets, no longer unfamiliar, were gently tangled around her legs. But it wasn't comfort that stirred her. It was the feeling of being watched. When she opened the door, barefoot and drowsy, she found Xander standing in the living room, shirtless, back turned to her, staring out the window with a cup of coffee in hand. His shoulder blades shifted as he moved, and just as she was about to retreat quietly, her eyes caught something that made her freeze. A scar. Faint, silvery, slicing down his right side from shoulder to lower back. It wasn't small. It wasn't new. Xander turned slightly, unaware of her stare. "You're up early." Aurora stepped in. Aurora reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing the edge of the scar. He didn't flinch. "You're not powerless, Xander," she said softly, "but you're still haunted." He took her hand, gently pulling it away from his skin. "We all are." A knock broke the moment. Xander pulled a shirt over his head and strode to the door. Aurora remained still, the warmth of his skin still tingling in her fingertips. The cold drizzle of a late November evening fell in sheets over the East End of London, where mist clung to red brick buildings and blurred the glow of antique lampposts. Wet pavements shimmered under Aurora Ihoza's feet as she hurried along the narrow streets of Shoreditch, dodging puddles and trying to ignore the way her canvas trainers squelched with every step. The distant sound of a siren sliced through the fog like a warning cry, and somewhere in the distance, a street musician played a haunting tune on a violin beneath a scaffolding-covered awning. Aurora pulled her jacket tighter around her, a faded gray thing that did little to ward off the cold. It clung damply to her body, and her curly black hair, soaked through, framed her face in wild coils. In one hand, she clutched a canvas tote containing the meager earnings from her late shift at the local cafe, a handful of tips and a barely there wage. In the other, she gripped a small paper bag containing medicine for Lucy, her 15-year-old sister, currently on dialysis at Homerton Hospital. Every pound earned tonight mattered. Every moment wasted could mean a missed treatment. That was her life now, day by day, pound by pound, breath by uncertain breath. She passed a shuttered newsagent and ducked into an alleyway shortcut, hoping to make it home before the last bus left Hackney Road. A flicker of movement under a fire escape made her flinch, but it was only a fox rummaging through bin bags. Aurora sighed and kept walking. Then, suddenly, the world lit up in a strobe of red and blue. A police car swung into the alleyway, its tires hissing over the wet tarmac. Before she could react, two uniformed officers stepped out, faces unreadable, postures stiff with protocol. "Aurora Ihoza?" one asked curtly. She froze, heart pounding. "Yes." "You're under suspicion for theft. A Rolex watch was reported stolen from the cafe where you work earlier this evening. You'll need to come with us." "What?" Aurora's voice cracked. I didn't take anything. That's not possible." The female officer stepped forward, removing a pair of handcuffs from her belt. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used in court." Aurora instinctively clutched her bag tighter. "Please, I've just finished my shift. I don't know anything about a watch. My sister's waiting. I have to get home." But before her plea could take shape, cold steel clamped around her wrists, biting against her skin. The paper bag of medicine slipped from her grip, landing in a soggy puddle. In the back of the squad car, the windows fogged from the inside, and all Aurora could see were the glistening streets sliding past like memories. Her mind raced. Lucy. What would Lucy do when she didn't come home? Who would explain? Who would bring the tablets she needed? Her stomach turned as they approached the station. Dalston Central, an old brutalist building looming like a fortress. As they led her through the doors, fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly glow on peeling paint and stained linoleum. Inside the station, she was placed in a stark interrogation room, its single chair cold against her soaked clothes. A kettle hissed in the corridor. The only sound within the room was the tapping of keys as a desk officer entered details on his computer without so much as a glance at her. Aurora Ihoza, 21, no criminal history, he muttered, but a 20,000-pound Rolex was discovered in a bin behind the cafe. I didn't steal anything, Aurora said, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone must have planted it. Please, I don't even know who owns a Rolex. The officer didn't respond, just typed. Aurora shivered uncontrollably, damp hair sticking to her face. Her thoughts drifted to Lucy, lying pale and silent on her hospital bed. She couldn't go to prison. There was no one else to care for her. Their mother had passed when they were young, and their father had disappeared into debt and silence. Aurora was all Lucy had. Then the door opened. The atmosphere shifted. A tall man entered. No uniform, just a tailored charcoal suit that fit him like armor. His brogues barely made a sound on the worn floor tiles. A black wool coat hung effortlessly from his shoulders, and his cufflinks shimmered discreetly beneath the harsh light. But it wasn't his wealth that made Aurora sit straighter. It was his eyes. Cold, sharp, the color of storm clouds and betrayal. Xander Raphael. She didn't know him, not personally, but she'd seen his name in headlines. The reclusive tech magnate behind Raphael International, Britain's youngest billionaire, and one of the most controversial figures in the London business elite. This watch, he said, producing a plastic evidence bag. Inside the Rolex glinted with quiet arrogance. It belongs to me. The officer looked stunned. Mr. Raphael, we found it behind the cafe in a bin. This woman was seen exiting the premises shortly before. She didn't steal it, Xander interrupted, his voice even. I have reason to believe it was planted to frame her. Aurora stared at him, her jaw tightened. I didn't ask for your help. I know, he said, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. But you've been caught in something that isn't your fault, and I intend to fix it. Her eyes narrowed. Why? He studied her, as if deciding how much of the truth she could handle. Because you were framed by someone trying to hurt me. You're collateral. My ex-mistress, to be specific, she wants revenge. Unfortunately, you happened to serve her a cappuccino this morning. Aurora's mind reeled. She remembered the woman, a tall, sharp-featured blonde in designer red. She had spilled coffee, acted friendly, lingered too long. It hadn't seemed important at the time. Now it felt like everything. Xander leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. I can make this go away, but I need something in return. Her heart thumped. What? I need you to play a role. For the next month, I want you to be my girlfriend. Attend events, smile for cameras, stand beside me at business meetings. Make a man named Edwin Bowen extremely uncomfortable. Who's Edwin Bowen? She asked cautiously. My rival. He's dating my ex and trying to destroy my company's upcoming merger. If he thinks I've moved on with someone confident, grounded, and unafraid, it'll shake him. Aurora stared at him. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? For revenge? I'll pay your bail, cover your sister's medical bills, give you a fresh start. In return, you step into my world and play by my rules. Aurora looked away, her jaw set. The room smelled of stale paper and aftershave. Her body ached from the cold, but Lucy's face swam before her eyes. Her sister's weak smile, her shaking fingers. This man, Xander Raphael, was arrogant, calculating, and manipulative. But he was offering something no one else had, a way out. She turned back to him, steady now. I'll do it, but on my terms. Xander raised an eyebrow. You don't touch me unless I say you can. I leave if I want, and if I smell a lie, I walk. He gave a faint smile, not of amusement, but something close to admiration. Agreed. The officer returned a moment later, clearly bewildered, and removed her handcuffs. Aurora rubbed her wrists, eyes never leaving Xander's. The air outside was still heavy with rain. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom waited at the curb, engine humming. Xander opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Aurora hesitated. Behind her lay the streets of Shoreditch, soggy newspapers, broken dreams, and a sister waiting. Ahead was a world she didn't understand, wrapped in secrets, soaked in power. She slid into the car, and for the first time in her life, the door didn't close on her. It opened. Rain traced soft rivers down the windows of the Rolls-Royce as it glided through the streets of central London. Aurora Ihoza sat in the leather-clad passenger seat. Soaked trainers crossed beneath her, trying not to let her nerves show. The warmth of the car contrasted too sharply with the world she just left behind: cracked pavements, cold handcuffs, and fluorescent police lights. Across from her, Xander Raphael sat like he owned the world. The CEO of Raphael International was scrolling through his phone with unreadable calm. His wristwatch, a different Rolex no doubt, glinted under the interior lighting. Even in silence, his presence was overpowering, as if he radiated command in every breath. Aurora stared out at the streets rolling by, recognizing landmarks she'd only ever seen from bus windows. The glinting towers of Canary Wharf, the Thames coiling beneath glowing bridges, the boutiques of Mayfair closing for the night. She suddenly felt small, unbelievably small. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My residence," he replied without looking up. "You'll need somewhere to stay if we're going to pull this off." She frowned. "You think I'm going to live with you?" "It's not about comfort, Aurora," he said, finally glancing over. "It's about control. I need to know where you are, what you're wearing, who you're speaking to. Everything about this has to be polished." "I'm not a doll," she snapped, narrowing her eyes. "No," he agreed, "you're not, which is why this will work. But understand this. If we're to sell the story, you'll be under constant scrutiny. Media, investors, the board. One wrong move and Edwin Bowen will pounce." She folded her arms, still trembling slightly from the chill of the station. "And what happens if I decide this is all too much?" "Then you leave," Xander said, "but not before I've taken every necessary precaution to protect my business and your sister." Aurora bit the inside of her cheek. Lucy. That name grounded her. Reminded her of why she was doing this. The car rolled to a stop in front of a modern glass high-rise along the edge of South Bank, its facade glittering under the city's nightlights. A valet opened the door, and Aurora stepped out onto a marbled pavement, so pristine she felt embarrassed by the wet trail her shoes left behind. Inside, the lobby was bathed in gold light. Art Deco furniture. A concierge who bowed at the mere sight of Xander. It was another world. Elegant, silent, perfect. Xander said nothing as they entered the private lift. The doors closed, sealing them into polished steel and soft jazz. She felt the tension radiating off him like static electricity. He wasn't just powerful. He was dangerous in the way lines were dangerous. Elegant, beautiful, but likely to destroy you without flinching. The lift chimed, floor 38. Xander's penthouse opened into a cavernous space of glass and wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed London's glimmering skyline, while walnut floors stretched from wall to wall. The decor was minimalist but expensive. Sleek Italian sofas, abstract art, a grand piano by the far corner. Aurora stepped inside slowly, her damp clothes clinging to her skin. She felt like an oil smudge on a white silk dress. "This is obscene," she muttered under her breath. Xander tossed his keys into a ceramic bowl and loosened his tie. "You'll get used to it." She turned to him. "No, I won't. This isn't my world, Xander. His name slipped from her mouth like a challenge. He paused at the sound of it, then met her gaze directly. It is now. She shook her head. No, I'm here for Lucy, not to be paraded like some trophy. You agreed to play the part. That includes living in my world. Aurora walked past him, trailing fingers along the marble kitchen island. It was spotless, of course, like everything else. A gleaming wine fridge sat beneath a built-in espresso machine. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and leather. She crossed her arms. So what now? Do I sleep on the couch? Xander gestured down a hallway. There's a guest suite. You'll find fresh clothes in the wardrobe. Wear what you like when we're alone, but in public, I'll be selecting your wardrobe. She raised an eyebrow. Controlling much? Essential, he replied. People are already watching. The fewer inconsistencies, the better. Appearances are everything. She exhaled through her nose. And what if I don't play along? He stepped closer, closing the space between them. Not menacing, but intense. Then Lucy suffers. The bills stop. The lawyers I've hired to keep your name clean disappear. There it was, the game behind the offer, the silk rope disguised as rescue. Aurora's chest tightened. She hated him in that moment for holding her future like a weapon. But more than that, she hated herself for needing his help. He must have sensed the storm in her silence because he stepped back and gestured again to the hallway. Your room. There's a bathroom through the door. Shower, change. We'll talk more after. She didn't move right away. One rule, she said firmly. You don't touch me. He gave a slow nod. Unless you say otherwise. Aurora turned and walked down the hallway, her steps echoing softly on the walnut floor. The guest suite was larger than her entire flat in Hackney. A four-poster bed with navy silk sheets, a walk-in closet stocked with new designer labels, a chandelier above the dressing table. It was all unreal. She peeled off her wet clothes, stepping into the marbled bathroom. The hot water of the rainfall shower washed over her, but it couldn't melt the cold knot sitting in her stomach. Who was she becoming? When she emerged, towel wrapped tightly around her, she opened the wardrobe to find a navy blue wrap dress, soft cashmere against her fingers. The tag still hung on it, 1,200 pounds. Just a dress. Her hands trembled slightly as she put it on. She kept her hair loose and bare, her face natural. If she was going to be part of this illusion, she'd hold on to something real. Xander was waiting by the window when she returned to the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His suit jacket was gone, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows. The city sprawled behind him, lit like a diamond field. He turned. His gaze dropped to her bare feet. You didn't wear the shoes. I don't wear shoes in other people's homes, she replied coolly. His lips twitched. Noted. She sat across from him on the sleek L-shaped sofa. A fire crackled softly in a recessed fireplace. For a moment, they sat in silence. Then he spoke. Tell me about your sister. Aurora blinked. Why? Because I need to understand what matters to you. That's how I make this believable. She hesitated. Lucy's 15. She's got a rare kidney disease. She was diagnosed last year. I've been working double shifts to afford her treatments. We lost our mom when I was 10. Dad vanished. It's just been us since. Xander nodded slowly. You've done well. She looked at him, something bitter rising. Don't patronize me. You think money fixes everything. It doesn't. He met her glare without blinking. No, but it gives you options, which you didn't have until now. She hated that he was right. I need this to work, Aurora, he said softly. If Edwin Bowen succeeds in sabotaging my merger, everything falls apart. You're not just part of a game. You're the deciding move. And if I mess up, you won't, he said, standing and extending a small gift box. She eyed it suspiciously. What's this? Your phone. New number? Encrypted. Only I can reach you. Only you can reach me. Aurora took it slowly. Cold metal, sleek screen, expensive. She nodded once. Welcome to the role, he said. She glanced around the room. Glass, steel, control, and swallowed her pride. For Lucy. I'll be the girlfriend you need, Xander, she said quietly. But don't forget, this isn't real. He turned toward the window, his reflection blurred in the glass. No, he said, almost to himself, not yet. The following evening, the streets of Mayfair sparkled with golden light and quiet elegance. Sleek black cars lined the curb, and the scent of expensive perfume mingled with the faint aroma of champagne from inside tall, glowing buildings. It was a world of silk and crystal, of whispered alliances and sharpened smiles. And Aurora Ihosa, standing at the foot of a red-carpeted staircase in a navy evening gown, was about to make her debut. Xander Raphael stood beside her in a bespoke black tuxedo, bow tie crisply knotted, his hair swept back like a sculpture. He looked as if he'd stepped from the pages of Tatler, untouchable, regal, calculated. Aurora smoothed the satin of her dress with trembling fingers. The gown fit perfectly, cinched at the waist with delicate embroidery that shimmered like stars. It had arrived that morning in a garment bag from Savile Row, along with matching heels and a velvet case containing a borrowed diamond bracelet. Xander's stylist had dropped them off without a word. Relax, he murmured, adjusting the cufflinks at his wrist. You look exquisite. She gave a tight smile. I look like someone playing dress-up. That's the point, he said calmly. Play the part, and the rest will follow. They were attending the annual Winter Trust Gala, hosted at the prestigious Marlowe Estate in Grosvenor Square, an event swarming with politicians, investors, and high society elites. It was the kind of place where reputations were made or shattered with a glance. Tonight, Xander's mission was clear: to announce in the most effortless way possible that he had moved on from the scandal of his former mistress, and more importantly, that he was winning. As they climbed the grand staircase arm in arm, Aurora's heart thundered behind her ribcage. The doors opened to a breathtaking ballroom. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, waiters moved like dancers, and classical music floated through the air. The moment they stepped in, every head turned. A hush swept across the room like a gust of wind. Aurora could feel the weight of their stares, the curious, the judging, the envious. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. She had spent her life hiding behind bus stops and greasy diner counters. But tonight, for Lucy, for herself, she would not flinch. Xander guided her through the room, nodding at familiar faces, occasionally offering introductions. This is Aurora Ihosa, he said smoothly. My partner. The word hung in the air like a secret invitation. Aurora smiled politely, repeating lines Xander had rehearsed with her. Her backstory, edited for taste, her current role consulting on urban charity projects, and her love for classical literature. Every detail had been chosen to complement his narrative, refined, understated, intriguing. They reached the heart of the gala, where a cluster of financiers and executives stood like a parliament of wolves. Among them was a man with a familiar smirk, his suit light gray and tailored to perfection, his blonde hair slicked back, Edwin Bowen. Aurora recognized him instantly from the dossier Xander had shown her. Media darling, ruthless boardroom player, and the man currently dating Xander's former mistress. His eyes narrowed the moment he saw her. Xander, Edwin drawled, voice dripping with faux charm. Didn't expect to see you here, much less with a date. Xander's smile was carved from stone. Aurora, meet Edwin Bowen. She extended her hand, her expression perfectly polite. Pleasure. Edwin took her fingers, brushing them with a kiss. His eyes lingered too long. The pleasure is mine. And what a surprise. I hadn't realized Xander was still hiring his dates. The insult was barely veiled. Xander's jaw tensed, but his voice remained cool. Aurora is a partner, not a prop. Unlike some people, I don't confuse status with substance. Edwin's smile never wavered, but the flash in his eyes betrayed him. He turned to Aurora. He must have pulled you from a pageant, or perhaps a bakery. Aurora's gaze sharpened like glass. Actually, I studied economic policy and community development, but I do enjoy baking. Xander blinked, she had improvised. Edwin chuckled, but the tension pulsed. Lovely, though I imagine this is quite the upgrade from wherever you were before. Aurora stepped closer, voice velvet and steel. Perhaps, but no matter where I come from, I know enough to spot a snake in a tailored suit. Gas rippled nearby. Edwin's eyes flashed, but Xander's laughter was low and unforced. You see, Edwin, he said smoothly, placing a hand on Aurora's lower back. That's why I chose her. Aurora's cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, but adrenaline. She had just held her own in a den of wolves. The rest of the night passed in a blur of introductions, compliments, and whispered speculations. Some guests eyed her with disdain, others with admiration. But Aurora kept her posture regal and her smile carefully controlled. When the time came for Xander to give a short speech about the merger his company was preparing, she stood beside him on the stage, a silent but powerful accessory. Cameras flashed, notes were scribbled, headlines were already forming. Later, as they descended the steps outside the estate, Aurora exhaled, the cold air hitting her lungs like freedom. Xander opened the car door for her, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. You handled Bowen well, he finally said, as the driver pulled into the quiet streets of Mayfair. I didn't say anything you wouldn't have, she replied, removing her heels and stretching her aching feet. He glanced at her, something like amusement softening his eyes. No, you said it better. Silence settled between them, comfortable now. Aurora leaned her head against the car window, watching the city lights blur past. She hated that a part of her had enjoyed it, the thrill of standing toe-to-toe with the rich and ruthless, the rush of power in being seen, admired, feared. She had spent her entire life being invisible. Now, for the first time, she had presence. Back at the penthouse, Xander loosened his bow tie and poured them both glasses of sparkling water. You don't drink, he asked. I don't pretend to enjoy things just because everyone else does, she said simply. He raised his glass. To honest liars. She raised hers too. To charming snakes. They clinked. Aurora wandered toward the window. London's skyline stretched before her like a painting. Her reflection hovered faintly in the glass. Navy gown, glowing skin, eyes wide with thought. Xander stepped beside her. What are you thinking? That I'm starting to forget this is pretend. He looked at her then. Really looked. And for a moment, the air shifted. No one's ever stood up to Bowen like that, he said, let alone in heels and a borrowed bracelet. She smirked. Try growing up in social housing. He's just a fox in Savile Row. Xander's gaze lingered on her lips, then her eyes. Be careful, Aurora, he said softly. You're playing with fire. So are you, she whispered back. He didn't touch her, didn't kiss her. But something passed between them, intimate, dangerous, inevitable. That night, as she lay in bed wrapped in silk sheets, Aurora replayed the evening over and over. Her words, his stare, the unspoken things neither of them was willing to admit. She didn't know what this was. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just playing a role anymore. She was becoming it. And that terrified her more than anything else. By the end of her first week in Xander Raphael's world, Aurora Ihosa had learned three things. First, no one in London's elite ever said what they meant, but everyone noticed what you wore. Second, charity was a weapon. And third, proximity to power did not protect you from becoming its target. It started on a rainy Thursday morning when Aurora stepped out of a sleek black car into the lobby of the Somerset Hall Foundation. The high society charity event was not just a fundraiser. It was a battlefield where alliances were brokered over canapes and enemies cut with compliments. She wore a high-necked cream blouse tucked into a tailored wine-red skirt, elegant, timeless. Xander had sent a stylist to her suite that morning, but Aurora had insisted on choosing her own outfit. He hadn't protested. You look like you belong here, he said simply as she joined him by the elevator, his hand ghosting against the small of her back. But even before they reached the ballroom, she felt it. The whispers. She's the one from Hackney, isn't she? Just a pretty face for the camera. He's never had someone quite so provincial. Aurora kept walking, back straight, smile soft. Xander's fingers found hers in a practiced gesture of control, and though the touch steadied her, it also made her skin burn. It wasn't the gossip that hurt. It was how effortlessly she was becoming numb to it. Inside the ballroom, live jazz floated through the air, and clinking champagne flutes punctuated polite conversations. Xander moved between clusters of guests like a conductor, each nod and handshake orchestrated with precision. And Aurora followed, graceful, calm, absorbing everything. But then Edwin Bowen appeared. He stood by the bar in a slate blue suit, a crystal glass of something amber in his hand. He was alone, but his grin bloomed the moment he saw them. "Well," he said, sauntering over, "the power couple returns." Xander's jaw flexed. "Edwin." Aurora nodded politely, but Edwin's eyes lingered on her, uncomfortably long. "Aurora," he said, his voice like velvet over broken glass, "you're becoming quite the fixture." "Habit forming," she replied, her tone sweet as a knife. He laughed. "You're quick, but let's not pretend this is more than a pageant. We all know the script." Xander stepped forward, voice low. "Careful." Edwin smirked. "Touchy. I only mean that the headlines are curious. The woman who came out of nowhere. No past, no family, no credentials." Aurora's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "You've read the tabloids, I see. Perhaps you'd like an autograph." Several guests nearby turned to listen. Xander shot Edwin a look that could shatter concrete. But Edwin was already sauntering away, smugness radiating from every step. Later that evening, back at the penthouse, Aurora slammed the fridge shut, her cheeks flushed with fury. "He's trying to rattle you," Xander said from the doorway. "He's trying to unravel me," she snapped, "Claudenturi. And you're letting him." Xander stepped forward, rolling his sleeves up past his forearms. "This isn't schoolyard politics. This is war. If he sees you crack, he'll use it." Aurora turned, arms folded. "So I just smile while he mocks me? Pretend I don't have a past?" He met her eyes. "You don't need to explain yourself to anyone, especially not him." Silence settled between them like dust. Finally, she exhaled and walked past him, pulling down 2 glasses from the cabinet. "Fine," she muttered. "Wine?" He raised an eyebrow. "You don't drink." "Tonight," she said, uncorking a bottle of French red, "I'll make an exception." They sat on opposite ends of the L-shaped sofa, legs curled under them, the city lights glittering beyond the glass. She took a sip. "Tell me something honest." Xander leaned back, swirling the wine. "I once bought a Picasso painting just to keep it away from a man I hated." She laughed. "That's not honesty. That's pettiness with a platinum card." He grinned. "Fair." He looked at her, really looked, at the fire in her eyes, the way her hands held the stem of the glass like it might crack. "You were brilliant today," he said. She blinked. "You think so?" "I think Bowen won't forget it. And neither will half the board." Aurora sipped again. The wine was rich, heady. "Do you ever feel like this whole world is balancing on a lie?" Xander stared at his glass. "Every day." She turned toward him. "Then why keep it going?" "Because I have too much to lose." Aurora's voice softened. "Like what?" He didn't answer right away. Then, without looking at her, he said, "Control, reputation, safety." She set her glass down. "And me?" Xander's gaze lifted to hers. The room shrank around them. "You're becoming something I never accounted for," he said quietly. She didn't know whether to feel flattered or afraid. A part of her had hoped this would remain strictly transactional, but another part, quieter, more reckless, had started craving these moments. When his walls came down, when he saw her not as a strategy, but as something more. She stood slowly, her bare feet silent on the polished floor. "I'm going to bed," she whispered. Xander rose as well. "Aurora!" She turned back. "Don't!" He took a step forward. What are we doing? She met his gaze, her voice trembling. We're playing pretend, and the problem is, I think I'm starting to believe it. Then she disappeared down the hallway, heart racing, the taste of red wine still on her lips. That night she dreamt of Lucy, laughing, healthy, standing in a field of lavender. But in the distance, Xander waited beneath a tree, watching her with that same unreadable stare. And when Aurora woke, the space beside her was empty, but her chest ached like she'd been held all night. The morning after the charity event was unusually quiet. Aurora Ihosa woke to sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains, the air scented faintly with bergamot from the diffuser Xander's housekeeper had left in the room. Despite the penthouse's usual sterile polish, her room felt warmer now, lived in. A soft cream robe hung over the wardrobe door. The silk sheets, no longer unfamiliar, were gently tangled around her legs. But it wasn't comfort that stirred her. It was the feeling of being watched. When she opened the door, barefoot and drowsy, she found Xander standing in the living room, shirtless, back turned to her, staring out the window with a cup of coffee in hand. His shoulder blades shifted as he moved, and just as she was about to retreat quietly, her eyes caught something that made her freeze. A scar. Faint, silvery, slicing down his right side from shoulder to lower back. It wasn't small. It wasn't new. Xander turned slightly, unaware of her stare. You're up early. Aurora stepped in. You didn't mention you were ex-military. He stilled. I'm not. She walked toward him. Then where did the scar come from? He glanced over his shoulder. A mistake. That's not an answer. He turned to face her fully, shirtless, guarded. Does it matter? Only if you keep hiding it. A beat passed, then very quietly he said, I was 17. My mother died unexpectedly. I'd just been admitted into a sixth form academy in Surrey when the truth came out. She'd left behind nothing but debts. Aurora remained silent, watching his every word. My father, Xander continued, refused to pay for her funeral, said she'd disgraced the family. I took the last bit of money she left behind and tried to survive. Got into a fight with a loan shark's enforcer when I couldn't pay the interest back in time. His jaw flexed. He wanted to make an example, so he carved one. Aurora stared at him. You nearly died. He gave a short, humorless laugh. No, I wished I had. That would have been easier. She stepped closer. Is that why you built all this? The company, the image, the armor? Xander looked at her then, truly looked. That scar reminds me of everything I had to become to never feel powerless again. Aurora reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing the edge of the scar. He didn't flinch. You're not powerless, Xander, she said softly, but you're still haunted. He took her hand, gently pulling it away from his skin. We all are. A knock broke the moment. Xander pulled a shirt over his head and strode to the door. Aurora remained still, the warmth of his skin still tingling in her fingertips. A uniformed concierge stepped in with a silver envelope and a tray. From Mr. Bowen's office, he said, before leaving silently. Xander's jaw tightened. Aurora crossed the room. More trouble? He handed her the envelope. She opened it carefully, eyes scanning the embossed card inside. Mr. Xander Raphael and Miss Aurora Ihosa are cordially invited to the Bowen Financial Winter Soiree this Friday at Kensington Pavilion. Formal attire, attendance expected. She raised an eyebrow. Expected? It's a provocation, Xander muttered. A calculated power move. He wants to control the narrative. Aurora handed the card back. So don't go. I have to, he said. The board will be watching. Pulling out looks like weakness. She sighed. Then we go, and we don't flinch. Xander studied her for a long moment. You're not the girl I met at the station. Aurora's chin lifted. No, I'm the woman you asked to play your partner. He smiled faintly. You're far more than that. Friday night came faster than expected. Aurora stood in front of the full-length mirror, wrapped in a gown the color of obsidian, slashed elegantly at the back. Her hair was pinned into soft waves, a delicate diamond comb catching the light. The stylist had done well, But it was Aurora's poise that made her unforgettable. Xander entered the room in a fitted black velvet tuxedo. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, "You look like a secret no one deserves to know." "No," she turned. "You always say the right things." "Only to you." At Kensington Pavilion, the soiree glittered like an ice palace. Glass walls, silver chandeliers, and white roses flooded the room in surreal opulence. The Bowens were infamous for their theatrics, and tonight was no different. As they entered, Aurora immediately felt the scrutiny. People paused mid-sentence to stare, some with curiosity, some with disdain, and a few with outright jealousy. But she didn't cower. She stood beside Xander, hand in hand, head held high. Edwin Bowen made his entrance from the far end of the room, champagne flute in hand, draped in smugness. When he approached, Aurora braced herself. But this time he surprised her. "Aurora," he said smoothly, "I owe you an apology." Her brow furrowed. "For what happened at Somerset Hall," he said. "I may have overstepped." She didn't trust the change in tone. "That's generous of you." He smiled tightly. "No, it's strategic." Then he turned to Xander. "I hope you're ready for Monday's vote." Xander's voice was steel. "I always am." The conversation ended, but the implication lingered. As the evening unfolded, Aurora kept her smile perfect. She danced once with Xander, letting the music carry them across the floor like old lovers. Cameras flashed, people whispered, but something in Xander's posture was off. He was tense, distracted. When she leaned in during a waltz and whispered, "What's wrong?" he didn't answer. Back at the penthouse, she confronted him. "You've been quiet since Bowen mentioned Monday." Xander poured himself a drink. "There's a vote coming on whether I remain CEO after the merger. The board's rattled by rumors of insider dealings." She folded her arms. "And they think you're the leak?" "No," he said flatly. "They think you are." Aurora's stomach dropped. "What?" "One of the directors received an anonymous email last week claiming you've been feeding information to Bowen, that the relationship is a ruse, that you're," he paused, "an actress I hired." Her chest tightened. "Do you believe that?" He looked at her and didn't answer immediately. That pause sliced deeper than anything Edwin Bowen had ever said. Aurora stepped back, pain flashing across her face. "You do." Xander took a breath. "I don't want to, but I need to know where you stand." She shook her head. "After everything, after Lucy, after I stood by you, smiled for you, took bullets for you in heels, you still think I could be using you?" "I don't know what to think anymore," he said quietly. She stared at him, silent tears brimming in her eyes. "Then I'll make it easy. I'm leaving." Xander moved forward. "Aurora." "No." Her voice cracked. "You promised not to touch me unless I asked you to." She turned, walked to the guest suite, and packed her things. 10 minutes later, she left the penthouse with nothing but her phone, her dignity, and the coat she'd arrived in the night she was arrested. It was raining again. Of course it was. The rain came harder the farther Aurora Ahoza walked. The night had swallowed her whole, but she didn't stop. The sharp winds of Kensington whipped against her coat, and her heels, elegant and wholly impractical, sank into the pavement with every determined step. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay. Not in Xander Raphael's world, not under his roof, not after the way he'd looked at her, as though she were something forged, not felt, fabricated. A performance, a risk. "He thinks I betrayed him," the thought carved deeper than any of Edwin Bowen's petty attacks. Xander hadn't shouted. He hadn't accused her with venom. He had done something worse. He had doubted her. And that, to Aurora, felt like the worst kind of betrayal. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. She finally glanced at the screen. "Xander Raphael, call me, please. A car is waiting at Hyde Park Gate. Just tell me where you are." She turned the phone off. Let him stew. Let him realize that some women don't just break, they disappear. By the time she reached the gate of her old building in Hackney, her toes were numb and her coat was soaked through. The place looked smaller than she remembered, colder. The walls needed paint, and the lift still wheezed like it was dying. But it was home. She climbed the stairs and knocked on a familiar door. After a few seconds, it creaked open to reveal a short woman in a headscarf and mismatched slippers. "Missy Hosa?" Aurora smiled weakly. "Mrs. Obasi, could I stay for a night or two? Just until I find something else." The old woman stepped aside instantly. "You don't even have to ask." By morning, London was gray and unfeeling again. Aurora sat at the small kitchen table, sipping cheap tea from a cracked mug. Her suitcase lay beside her feet, still unopened. She hadn't slept. Not really. She'd just lain awake on the sagging sofa, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Xander's voice, his eyes, that awful, fatal silence when she'd asked, "Do you believe I would do that?" Mrs. Obasi shuffled in with a tray of toast and butter. "Still no call?" she asked gently. Aurora shook her head. "I turned the phone off." The older woman sat across from her. "Is it pride or pain?" Aurora looked down at her tea. "Both." Mrs. Obasi leaned forward, her voice kind. "Sometimes the ones who hurt us most are the ones trying the hardest not to hurt at all." Aurora blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, men like him, powerful, wounded, they don't know how to trust what feels too good to be true. They expect betrayal. So when they get love, they don't know what to do with it." Aurora swallowed. "I didn't ask him to love me." "No, but you let him," she said gently. "And he let you too. That counts for something." Across London, Xander stood at the window of his penthouse, unshaven and hollow-eyed. The city glittered outside, but it meant nothing. She was gone. Truly gone. He had woken up to find her room empty, her things cleared, and the silence deafening. He hadn't even known her favorite color, or the book she always read before bed. He didn't know if she liked thunderstorms or if she cried in her sleep. He had let her stand beside him, fight for him, lie for him, and never once given her the full truth. And when she'd asked him to believe her, to really believe her, he'd hesitated. That hesitation had cost him everything. His phone vibrated. A message from his head of security. Subject, source confirmed. Bowen's mistress was the leak. She faked the email. Aurora's name was never in it. Xander dropped the phone. His heart stopped. It hadn't been Aurora. It had never been her. A moment. He doubted the only person who had stood beside him when everyone else plotted behind his back. She had endured gossip, scrutiny, and Edwin Bowen's public humiliation for him. And when she'd asked for something as simple as trust, he'd failed her. He was Xander Raphael. He had built an empire from a pile of broken pieces. But this was something he didn't know how to fix. He picked up his phone and dialed. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. And again. Still nothing. He ran his fingers through his hair and paste. Then, like lightning, a memory struck. The day she had left her hospital appointment with Lucy, laughing through tears because the doctor had said her sister was responding to treatment. She had said, "I'll never forget this place. It's the only time I've cried from happiness." Homerton Hospital. An hour later, Xander stood in the corridor outside Lucy Yehoza's ward, holding a bouquet of white peonies and looking like a man on the edge. Lucy blinked when he entered. "Mr. Raphael?" "Xander," he said gently. "I was wondering if you've heard from Aurora." Lucy tilted her head. "She was here this morning, dropped off my books. She didn't look okay." Xander nodded. "She's gone, and it's my fault." Lucy studied him carefully. "Did you break her heart?" "I think I broke both of ours." The teenager didn't reply right away. Then, "If you hurt her, you better mean it when you apologize. And you better fix it fast, because my sister doesn't give herself away easily." He nodded. "I know. And if you find her," Lucy added, "tell her she still owes me a dinner at that noodle place on Mare Street." Xander smiled faintly. "Deal." Back in Hackney, Aurora walked through Broadway Market, hoodie drawn low, hands shoved into her coat pockets. She needed distraction, something other than the ache in her chest. The baker waved at her, The florist asked how Lucy was, and a street artist offered her a free sketch. It was strange how much of her had been rooted here, and how easy it had been to forget. She paused at the used bookstore, the smell of dust and paper wrapping around her like an old memory. That's when she heard the door chime. She turned. And there he was. Xander Raphael. In an overcoat too fine for this street, holding a crumpled bouquet like it was armor, rain dripping from his collar. Her breath hitched. "What are you doing here?" "I came to find you," he said simply. She crossed her arms. "That's a bold choice considering you think I'm a liar." "I don't," he said, stepping closer. "I never really did. I just didn't know how to be the kind of man who trusts." "You could have tried," she said coldly. "I did," he whispered, "but I failed, and I'm sorry." She stared at him, unmoving. The email was a lie, a plant. My ex had Bowen send it. My team found proof this morning. Her jaw clenched. "So you only believe me now because someone else told you to?" "No." His voice broke. "I believe you now because I'm not afraid to." Aurora looked away, blinking hard. "You should leave." "I will," he said softly, setting the bouquet on the counter. "But first, I need you to know something." She looked at him. "I didn't just ask you to be my partner in a scheme," he said. "I asked you because I knew, somewhere deep down, that you were the one person who could shake me out of who I'd become." He stepped closer but didn't touch her. "You made me feel something again, Aurora. Something real. And if I've ruined that, I'll live with it. But I needed you to hear it." And then, without waiting for her forgiveness, Xander turned and left, the bell over the door chiming behind him. Aurora stood in silence. And for the first time in days, she let herself cry. But they weren't tears of defeat. They were the kind that whispered, "Maybe it's not over yet." 2 days passed. 2 long, unhurried days where Aurora Ihoza remained in Hackney, surrounded by the comfort of peeling paint, familiar street sounds, and the rhythmic clatter of trains in the distance. She helped Mrs. Obasi hang laundry. She visited Lucy and read to her from a dog-eared novel. She tried to forget the feel of Xander's hands, the heat of his breath when he whispered her name. But the truth was simple and cruel. She missed him. Not the suits, not the penthouse, not the image. Him. His silences that said more than his words, his relentless control, his broken edges that felt all too familiar. She didn't know if she was ready to forgive. But she was no longer certain she could forget. Then on the 3rd evening, Mrs. Obasi brought in a letter. No stamp, just a crisp envelope with her name handwritten in that impossible, deliberate script. Inside was a note. "I'll be at the South Bank bench, the one by the river, 8 p.m. Come if you want to know the truth. Not about the company, not about the deal. About me. Z." Aurora stared at the words for a long time. She didn't owe him anything, but her heart had other ideas. At precisely 8 p.m., she arrived. The South Bank was hushed, the city lights reflected in the slow-moving Thames. The bench sat under a vintage street lamp, warm light pooling at its feet. Xander was already there, dressed simply in a black coat and scarf, hands resting on his knees like a man waiting to be judged. He stood when he saw her. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said softly. "I wasn't sure either." They sat. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the city filled the silence. Then Aurora asked, "Why here?" Xander smiled faintly. "It's the first place I ran to after she left. My mother. She used to bring me here when I was small. Back when the world felt manageable." Aurora looked at him carefully. "And now?" "Now it feels like glass, always beautiful, always ready to shatter." He turned to her. "I came here to tell you the truth, all of it." Aurora folded her arms, but her voice was softer. "Then start," he inhaled. "I didn't just build Raphael International because I wanted to succeed. I built it because I was terrified of being nobody, of returning to who I used to be, poor, powerless, beaten, She remained quiet. I learned to make people trust my facade. The suits, the money, the precision. But you, he paused. You saw past it, and I didn't know what to do with that. Aurora tilted her head. So you tried to push me away? I tried to protect myself, he said simply. I just didn't realize I was also pushing away the one person who ever made me feel real. The wind carried their silence across the river. I believed you, she whispered. From the start. Even when everything felt wrong, I trusted you. But when it mattered, you didn't do the same. I know, he said, voice cracking. And I'm sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life saying that if I have to. She turned to him fully now. You hurt me. He nodded. I needed you to fight for me. I didn't know how, he said, until I lost you. The lights from a passing boat shimmered against her cheeks. She blinked, then said, I'm not looking for a savior, Xander. I'm not a project or a part in your empire. I know, he said. I need someone who sees me as their equal. Not someone to own, but someone to walk beside. I don't want to own you, he whispered. I want to learn how to deserve you. The words hung between them, raw, open, terrifying. And for the first time since the night she walked out, Aurora felt her walls tremble. I'm scared, she admitted. He reached out slowly, offering his hand. Not taking, just offering. So am I. She stared at his palm, then placed hers in it. No promises. No perfect endings. Just a beginning. The following week, the tabloids erupted. Xander Raphael seen holding hands with mystery girlfriend at South Bank. Insider sources confirm she's more than just a PR stunt. From Hackney to high society, who is Aurora Ihoza? The media circus returned in full force. But this time, Xander stood before the cameras, pulled Aurora close, and simply said, she's not part of a campaign. She's part of my life. And just like that, the tide began to turn. They fell into a rhythm, uneven, unexpected, beautiful. Xander learned to leave the office before 9 p.m. Aurora learned how to drink espresso without wincing. He taught her chess. She taught him how to burn toast. They fought over silly things. They kissed like it might be their last. He took her to Paris for a single night just to watch the Eiffel Tower lights with her hand in his. She surprised him with tickets to a jazz show in Soho and made him promise not to check his phone. They talked about Lucy's recovery. They talked about the past. And eventually, they talked about what scared them most. I'm terrified, Aurora admitted one night, curled beside him under a cashmere throw. Of what? He asked. That this is a dream, that I'll wake up and I'll be alone again. Xander kissed her temple. Then we'll make the dream real. One morning at a time. But not everything stayed perfect. One evening, while Aurora was reading in the living room, she heard Xander's voice from the office. Loud, angry. She peeked in. I told you not to touch the press, he barked into the phone. I don't care what Edwin Bowen's team leaked. You don't feed that fire. He ended the call with a slam. Aurora stepped in. What's going on? Xander sighed, rubbing his temples. Bowen's trying to push one final smear before the board finalizes the merger. He's hinting that your connection to me began as a payout, that I hired you for image control. Aurora's stomach turned. Again? He's desperate, Xander muttered, and he's playing dirty. She sat beside him. What do we do? Xander looked at her, exhausted. We stay quiet. The board will see the truth. Aurora hesitated. Or we go louder. He blinked. What do you mean? She reached for her phone. Let me speak. In my words. No PR, no handlers. Just the truth. Aurora. She placed her hand on his. Let me fight for you this time. That night, Aurora recorded a short video in the penthouse library. Simple, unpolished, sincere. My name is Aurora Ihoza. I didn't come from wealth. I wasn't born into privilege. But I fell in love with someone who did, and who nearly forgot how to feel. I was never hired. I was never coached. I walked into his world with nothing to prove. And I stayed because I saw the man beneath the suit, and he saw the woman I truly am. Say what you will. We're not perfect, but this love, this is the realest thing I've ever known. Xander watched the video in stunned silence. When it was over, he turned to her. You really love me, he said, as if realizing it for the first time. Aurora stepped into his arms. I do. His lips met hers in a kiss that didn't burn. It healed. And in that moment, hearts that had once fractured finally began to shift back into place, together. Monday dawned gray and ominous, as if the city itself anticipated a battle. Aurora Ihosa stood by the penthouse windows, staring down at the financial district far below. The skyline was blanketed in early fog, the rooftops blurred, and London's usual energy felt suspended in a breath. Behind her, Xander Raphael buttoned the last clasp on his navy pinstripe waistcoat. He had never looked more formidable. Sleek, sharp, prepared for war. But Aurora saw beyond the polish. She saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Are you ready? She asked, turning from the glass. Xander adjusted his cufflinks, his jaw clenched. I have to be. They're going to try to humiliate you, she said quietly. To paint me as a con. To take away what you've built. I know. He met her eyes. And that's why I need to walk in there with nothing to hide. She stepped forward, smoothing a hand down his chest. Then let me come. No, he said firmly. This is mine to fix. Xander. He took her hand. If they want blood, they'll get mine, not yours. She stared at him, heart pounding. I love you, you know. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. I love you too. That's why I have to fight for this on my own. The Raphael International headquarters towered over the city like a steel sentinel. Xander's arrival sent a buzz through the building. Suits straightened, phones were set down, board members whispered behind closed doors. In the top-floor conference room, 15 directors sat in a semicircle around a black marble table. The mood was tense, the air electric. At the head of the table sat Margot Winslow, chairwoman of the board, a silver-haired woman known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. She cleared her throat. Let's begin. Xander stood. No notes, no slides, just presence. I understand there have been concerns, he began, his voice smooth and firm. Concerns about my judgment, about my personal life, about Aurora Ihosa. Murmurs swept the table. Xander held up a hand. Allow me to be clear. Aurora is not an employee. She was not hired to manage public opinion. She is not a distraction. She is the one person who reminded me that leadership isn't just strategy, it's humanity. Several members shifted in their seats. One of our competitors, Xander continued, has attempted to use my personal life to destabilize this company. Edwin Bowen's campaign of misinformation includes fabricated emails, slanderous leaks, and manipulation of the press. He paused. But here's the thing. I don't regret any of it, because through it, I remembered why I started this company, not to crush rivals, but to build something worth believing in. Margot's eyes narrowed. And what do you propose? A vote, Xander said simply. Right now, keep me as CEO or don't, but do it based on facts, not whispers, not headlines, and certainly not fear. The room was still. Then Margot nodded. Very well. Board members, please submit your votes. One by one, they opened their tablets. The digital counter ticked forward with each submission. 7 to keep them, 6 to remove. Xander's heart thundered. Only 2 more votes. 8, keep. 9, remove. All eyes turned to the final director, James Holloway, a quiet man known for being conservative and indecisive. He hesitated, then clicked. 10, keep. Xander exhaled. He had won. Barely. But he had won. Downstairs, Aurora sat in the coffee bar on the ground floor, refreshing news feeds and sipping lukewarm tea. Then her phone buzzed. Xander, it's over. I'm still CEO. She closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. When he stepped into the cafe minutes later, she stood instantly. Before she could speak, he crossed the room, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her. Right there, in front of half the company. Gasps, whispers, but neither of them cared. When they finally parted, Xander said, "Come upstairs with me. I want them to see who saved me." They took the lift to the top floor together. When Aurora entered the boardroom, heads turned. Some with curiosity, others with disapproval. Xander led her to the front. "This," he said, gesturing toward her, "is Aurora Ihoza, the woman you've all speculated about. Now you can stop guessing." Aurora met their gazes squarely. "I didn't grow up with wealth or power or legacy. I grew up in a small flat with a sick sister and a mother who taught me to survive." Margot tilted her head. "Then why are you here?" "Because this man," Aurora said, turning to Xander, "looked at me once like I was nothing. Then again like I was everything. And both times I reminded him I don't belong to anyone, but I choose who I stand beside." A stunned silence followed. Then, to her surprise, Margot smiled faintly. "Well said." That evening, back in the penthouse, Xander uncorked a bottle of red wine while Aurora curled up on the sofa, wearing one of his shirts and a soft smile. "You did it," she said. "They kept you." "We did it," he corrected, pouring 2 glasses. She accepted hers. "And what now?" Xander sat beside her. "Now, I rebuild. Properly this time. With me?" "With you," he said softly. "If you'll stay." Aurora smiled, clinking her glass against his. "I'll stay, but only if we get matching bathrobes." He laughed, pulling her into his side. "Done." They sipped in silence, the city glowing outside their windows. No more secrets. No more pretending. Just the beginning of something rare and real. It started with a headline. "Breaking, confidential Raphael files leaked. Sources point to internal betrayal." Aurora Ihoza stared at her phone in disbelief, the words stinging her eyes like smoke. The news was everywhere, on screens in cafes, in murmured conversations on the street, and even whispered through the marble hallways of Raphael International. And all the whispers pointed to one name, hers. She stood in the center of Xander's penthouse, still barefoot from sleep, her dressing gown tied loosely at the waist, a half-eaten croissant forgotten on a plate nearby. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the article. Details of Xander's private financial records, contracts, meeting transcripts, boardroom memos, all leaked anonymously to the press. But the implication was clear. Aurora had access, and Xander had trusted her with everything. Her phone buzzed, dozens of notifications, messages, missed calls, and one that made her chest tighten, when Margot Winslow. Xander needs to get ahead of this, or the board will. Aurora swallowed, bile rising in her throat. And the door to the penthouse clicked. Xander stepped in, his coat still wet from the rain, jaw tense, expression unreadable. Their eyes met across the room. "It wasn't me," she said before he could speak. Her voice was small, frightened, but steady. Xander didn't speak immediately. He set his keys down slowly, like he was afraid of shattering something delicate. "I know," he said finally. Aurora exhaled. "But the board doesn't," he added, "and they're calling an emergency vote to suspend me." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "They're claiming I compromised the company by giving you access to confidential data. They want to remove me while they investigate. But they can't." She stopped, realizing they could. Xander crossed the room. "Margot's holding them back for now, but Edwin Bowen is behind this. I can feel it." "Then let me speak again." "Let me?" "No," he said firmly. "This time you stay out of it." Aurora blinked. "You think I'll make it worse?" "I think," he said carefully, "that they already blame you, and I won't let them tear you apart for it." She stepped back. "So I'm a liability now?" "No." His voice was softer now. "You're everything, which is why I have to protect you." "I don't want to be protected, Xander. I want to help." He stared at her, torn. But before he could respond, her phone lit up again. "Lucy. Heard the news. I'm fine, but someone just showed up at the hospital asking questions about you." "Be careful." Aurora's breath caught. Xander. They're going after Lucy. His eyes darkened. Then it's war. The next 48 hours moved like a thunderstorm. Xander's legal team began combing through every leak. His IT security firm traced the breach to an external server tied to Bowen Financial. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning enough to raise doubt. Meanwhile, the media spun faster than they could respond. Reporters camped outside the Raphael building. Photographers tracked Aurora's every step. Tabloids revisited her past, her childhood in Hackney, her mother's illness, Lucy's medical records. The narrative was turning cruel. She became the slum girl who fooled a CEO, the actress who brought down a billion-pound empire, the woman with a secret motive. And Xander? He was cast as either the fool in love or the conspirator. It all came to a head when the board issued a formal warning. Xander had 1 day to clear his name. If he failed, he'd be removed indefinitely. That night, Aurora stood at the penthouse window, the skyline blurred by rain. She held her phone to her chest, thinking of Lucy, of the first time she'd walked into this flat, soaked from a wrongful arrest, how far they had come, and how quickly it had all unraveled. Xander stepped up behind her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "I can't let you take the fall for this," she whispered. "You're not going to," he said. "But if they force me out, I want you to remember something." She turned to him, tears threatening. "What?" "That this," he said, pressing a hand over her heart, "was real, that we were never a performance." Aurora nodded, blinking fast. "I need to do something," she said. "One last thing." The next morning, while Xander faced the board upstairs, Aurora met a journalist in a small cafe in Camden. Her name was Geneva Blake, a rare voice in London media with a reputation for integrity. "I don't want to go on the record," Aurora said carefully. "I just want the truth to find the light." Geneva nodded. "Then tell me everything." Aurora did. The wrongful arrest, the false accusations, the planted Rolex, the fake girlfriend arrangement, the emotional fallout, the real love, and the betrayal they were now facing. Geneva listened, pen scratching slowly. When Aurora finished, she added, "And I can prove it. I have a voice memo." She pulled out her phone and played a clip, recorded just the night before. Edwin Bowen's voice, haughty and unmistakable. "Let the board suspend him. He'll come crawling back to renegotiate. That girl, she's just a tool. Nobody will believe her once we're done." Geneva looked stunned. "Do I have your permission to use this?" Aurora paused, then nodded. "But not for revenge, for the truth." Hours later, Geneva's expose hit the press. Exclusive, the voice behind the fall Bowen implicated in targeted smear campaign against Raphael International. The story went viral within minutes. Major networks picked it up. Bowen's own shareholders demanded explanations. Social media turned in Aurora's favor. And the board? They reversed the suspension vote before it even happened. Xander kept his position. Bowen was summoned for legal questioning. And Aurora was cleared. That night, Xander returned to the penthouse in silence. Aurora was waiting, curled on the sofa reading. She looked up the moment he entered, setting the book aside. He walked over, knelt in front of her, and took both of her hands. "You saved me," he whispered. "We saved each other," she replied. He stared at her for a long moment, then pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Aurora's breath caught. "I was going to wait," he said. "I wanted to do this in Paris, or on a rooftop, or something dramatic." She smiled through the tears now building in her eyes. "This is dramatic enough." Xander opened the box. Inside sat a ring, an oval diamond flanked by 2 sapphires, elegant and timeless. "I have loved you through scandal, silence, and every damn headline," he said. "I want to love you through peace, through mornings and burnt toast and quiet nights. I want to love you when you're angry and when you're proud. I want to be your family, and I want you to be mine." He looked up at her. "Aurora Ihosa, will you marry me?" She didn't speak right away. Instead, she leaned forward, placed both hands on either side of his face, and whispered, "Yes," then kissed him with all the courage she had left. Spring came early to London that year. Cherry blossoms bloomed along the River Thames, and the air smelled faintly of renewal, of old things made new, of stories reborn. The city, usually gray and cautious, seemed softer now, lighter. Aurora Ijosa stood on the balcony of Xander Raphael's penthouse, the wind dancing through the hem of her silk robe, her fingers wrapped around a warm mug of ginger tea. She watched the skyline glow beneath a honeyed sky, her heart steady, her eyes clear. Below her, the city that had once tried to find her whispered in awe. She had not just survived it, she had conquered it. Behind her, Xander stirred in the kitchen. He moved differently now, not softer, but freer. There was less tension in his shoulders, more laughter in his voice. He had learned to live beyond the edge of strategy. With her, he wasn't Xander Raphael, the CEO. He was simply Xander. "Toast is burning again," Aurora called, smiling. "Every time," he muttered. She stepped back inside just as he turned, half-scorched bread in hand, a sheepish grin on his face. "I make empires, not breakfast," he said. She walked over, took the plate from him, and kissed his cheek. "That's fine. I'll keep us both alive." As they sat down to eat, tea and blackened toast on gold-rimmed china, they spoke of little things. Lucy's latest prank at school, Xander's plans to restructure the company's mentorship program, the flat they'd bought in Shoreditch for weekend escapes, the upcoming trip to Morocco. There was no more pretending. No roles. No scripts. Just two people, wildly in love and unapologetically real. The wedding came 6 weeks later, and nothing about it was traditional. They didn't rent a castle or fill a ballroom with people they barely knew. Instead, they held it at the Layla Monroe Community Library, once the precinct where Aurora had been arrested, now a sanctuary she'd helped rebuild with Xander's funding. The guests were few, but sacred. Lucy walked Aurora down the aisle, a daisy crown in her locks and pride in her eyes. Xander wore a classic black suit but no tie, his top button undone just for her. Aurora wore a soft ivory gown that fluttered like a secret, her curls pinned with baby's breath, her eyes brighter than any diamond. Geneva Blake, the journalist who helped uncover Bowen's scandal, officiated. Because, as Aurora had said, if anyone deserves to witness our vows, it's the woman who fought for our truth. There were no rehearsed lines. Just love. Xander looked into her eyes, his voice quiet but firm. "I used to believe power would protect me. Then you walked into my life with no money, no armor, no apologies, and you protected something I forgot I even had. My heart." Aurora's eyes filled. Her voice trembled, but never broke. "I thought I had to fight the world alone. Then you showed me that love isn't weakness. It's the most powerful thing there is. And I vow to stand beside you, not beneath you, not behind you, but beside you, always." They kissed as confetti made of flower petals rained down. And in that kiss, every storm they'd survived vanished like mist. The weeks after their wedding were a blur of joy. They honeymooned on the Amalfi Coast, eating too much pasta and making love in villas that overlooked the sea. They read books under olive trees, made lists of baby names for someday, and laughed until the past felt like another life. And when they returned to London, it wasn't to resume the game, it was to rewrite the rules. Xander implemented sweeping changes at Raphael International, transparency policies, mental health support for staff, a new mentorship initiative for young Black entrepreneurs, and he named the first woman of color as the new chief operating officer. "I learned everything I know about resilience from her," he told the board, gesturing to Aurora seated proudly in the front row. As for Aurora, she launched the Ijosa Initiative, a nonprofit that supported underrepresented young women in urban communities. It funded education, mentorship, and mental health support across boroughs, once forgotten by the elite. When asked why she created it, she answered simply, "Because once someone took a chance on me when I had nothing. Now I want to do the same, without the conditions." Together they were unstoppable. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. One quiet Sunday, nearly a year to the day since they first met, Aurora sat on the rooftop garden of their new home in Chelsea, watching Lucy and Xander compete in a heated game of chess. "Not the queen," Lucy groaned as Xander made his move. "I warned you," Xander said with a smirk. "I'm 15 and recovering from major surgery," she yelled. "Show some mercy." Aurora laughed from her chair, hand resting gently on her belly. She hadn't told them yet. Not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to hold the secret a little longer, just for herself. That night, after Lucy went to bed, Xander joined Aurora in the rooftop swing, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Thinking?" he asked. She nodded. "About the girl I used to be. The one who wore rain-soaked trainers and walked into a precinct like the world was on fire?" She smiled. "That girl saved your empire." He kissed her shoulder. "That girl became my empire." She turned to him, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "I'm pregnant." For the first time since she'd known him, Xander was speechless. "Then," he laughed. Deep, joyful, unrestrained. "You're sure?" She nodded. He dropped to his knees, placed his hands on her stomach, and rested his forehead there. "You are my whole world," he whispered, "and now I get two of you." The tabloids wrote a different headline the next day. From prison cell to penthouse, Aurora Ihosa and Xander Raphael. Expect first child. But for once, Aurora didn't care. She didn't need to defend her name, or her worth, or her story, because she'd already written her own ending. And it began like this. She had walked through storms. She had fallen for a man with cold eyes and a guarded soul. She had been doubted, accused, torn apart. But she never stopped choosing love. And now, as she stood at the window of her new home, hand over her growing belly, watching Xander cook badly in the kitchen, and Lucy laugh from the couch, Aurora Ihosa finally understood what it meant to be loved. Not in pieces, not for show, but in full. 5 years later. The Raphael estate in Surrey gleamed beneath the late summer sun, surrounded by wild lavender fields and a long gravel path that curled toward the ivy-covered house like an invitation. Birds chirped, wind rustled through trees. The world, at least here, had slowed into something softer. Aurora Raphael. Once Aurora Ihosa sat on a blanket beneath a maple tree, barefoot, laughing, her sundress fluttering around her legs, as two tiny humans chased bubbles across the grass. Luca, their 3-year-old, was the loud one, always asking, always climbing, always covered in mud. Amara, only 15 months, was more curious than wild. She toddled behind her older brother with stubborn delight, squealing every time the breeze carried bubbles too high for her tiny fingers to catch. Xander appeared from the stone path moments later, holding a basket filled with snacks and a folded-up kite. His beard was a bit thicker now, his hair dusted with early silver at the temples, but the spark in his eyes hadn't changed. Not when he looked at his wife. And especially not when he looked at his children. "Daddy's got the watermelon," Luca yelled. "And the crumbling crackers you like," Xander added, sitting beside Aurora and placing a kiss on her cheek. She smiled. "You forgot the napkins again, didn't you?" "Completely," he said unapologetically. They laughed together, surrounded by wildflowers, the kind of laughter that comes not from jokes, but from peace, from knowing that they'd weathered the worst and were still here, still standing, still in love. In the world beyond their estate, they were a modern legend. Xander Raphael had become one of the most admired CEOs in the country, not just for his business acumen, but for how he rebuilt his company's values from the ground up. Transparency, inclusion, innovation. The very things he had once dismissed had become the cornerstone of his legacy. He now mentored emerging founders from overlooked communities. He spoke about mental health in leadership. And every single major decision passed through one voice first, Aurora's. She had stepped out of his shadow years ago and into her own light. The Ihosa initiative had grown into a nationwide movement, empowering young women with mentorship, funding, and mental health care. Their new headquarters in Brixton was named after her mother, Kioma. People didn't whisper anymore when she walked into boardrooms. They listened. They respected. And sometimes they even followed. That evening, as the kids napped upstairs and the estate bathed in golden light, Aurora stood on the balcony of their master bedroom, sipping orange tea, her curls tousled by the wind. Xander joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Did you ever think," she murmured, "that we'd end up here?" He kissed her neck. "Not in the beginning, but I hoped." She turned in his arms. "You were a storm, Xander. So were you." "And now?" she asked. He cupped her face. "Now we're home." They stood like that for a long time, watching the sky fade, listening to the cicadas hum, hearts quiet. Then Xander pulled a folded letter from his pocket. Aurora arched a brow. "What's this?" "A gift," he said, handing it to her. She opened it slowly. It was a letter of appointment from the Royal Trust for Global Equity, a foundation promoting education, justice, and innovation across the Commonwealth. Aurora Ihoza Raphael had been invited to join as a founding board member. She blinked, stunned. "This is historic," Xander finished, "and long overdue." She stared at him. "You did this?" He shook his head. "No, you did this. I just made sure they saw it." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't deserve you." He pulled her close. "Funny. I say the same thing every day." Down the hall, Luca stirred in his bed. Amara cooed in her cot. Life always moving, always calling, always needing something new. But for now, on this quiet evening in Surrey, everything was enough. Xander and Aurora stood side by side at the balcony, watching the sun sink low over the trees. Their hands entwined, their breaths in sync. This wasn't the fairy tale ending anyone expected. It was something better. It was earned. It was chosen. It was real. And it would last, not because of perfection, but because of two imperfect people who decided day after day to love each other fully, to believe in second chances, to rise even when the world pushed them down, to build a legacy from broken things and make it beautiful. Together. The end. Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.